So we are officially in the middle of the year. And a lot of us thought that this year was going to be our year. So we might be feeling a little bit discouraged if it hasn't, been going the way that we may have wanted. But there's still plenty of time for this year to turn around. So let's talk about it. Hey there, I'm Kathleen. Welcome to my channel. I'm a writer, founder, and storyteller. And if you want to check out some of my writing, the link to my Substack is in the description. And it's where I talk about rebuilding in your 30s, especially after loss and transitions and disruptions, especially in your career, and doing so with more ease and less chaos. So if you want to check that out, you can join my newsletter or you can become a member. Check the link in the description. So now let's talk about how the second half of the year can look much different from the first half. And there's still plenty of time for this to be your year. I've seen a lot of people across social media platforms, different ones, talking about how they thought that this year was going to be their year. And they've been feeling a little frustrated and discouraged because it's the middle of the year now and the year hasn't been, doing what they thought it was going to do. Tell me if that's you. Let me know in the comments if that's how you've been feeling. Did you think that this was going to be your year and so far it hasn't felt like it's been your year? Or did you think that this was going to be your year and so far it has been your year? Let me know. For me, I came into this year very hopeful. I didn't necessarily come in thinking like this is going to be my year because I don't know, lately, the past few years I've been through so many things that I've stopped saying that this year is going to be my year a few years ago. But I was definitely very hopeful because after, going through so many challenging things, I was hopeful, I'm still hopeful that at some point things have to turn around. At some point, just the pendulum has to swing. Like that's just isn't that physics? At some point, it has to go the other way. Everything is seasonal. There's a season for everything. So after years of challenges and disruption and just chaos, I was very hopeful that there'd be less chaos and, just more solid ground or just, for things to just kind of turn around. Now, what's interesting is that about 2 years ago, this time 2 years ago, I asked myself, what do you want? Because at the time, I was working a job that was very toxic, and I knew that I didn't want to be at that job long term, but I was very scared of what was next. I knew at some point I would work for myself. I also didn't know what that looked like. I wasn't ready at the time. And I also wasn't sure, what other jobs to look for because after almost 15 years in traditional corporate roles, I'm like, it's going to be more of the same. It's something has to give, something has to change. But I was just scared of the unknown. So I asked myself, what is it that you want? And I asked for freedom. And I also, what I didn't realize or what I didn't have the words for at the time, I was really asking for a state of ease, of contentment, and more peace. Now, the thing is that, the second half of the year can look very different from the first half. And technically, it did look different, just not how I thought. Because what I didn't know at the time is that sometimes when we ask for freedom, first we go through disruption. And that's why that year, the second half had a lot of disruption in my life compared to the first half, which technically, other than, being in that environment, it was pretty steady. It was kind of even. So I'm not saying be careful what you ask for, but I am saying that more times than not, when we ask for something, the road or journey path to receiving that thing usually does not look like how we thought it would, how we want it to look, or how we expect. And so I think that's what a lot of people are feeling right now, where you wanted this year to look different from other years, and so far it hasn't. Now, like I said, 2 years ago, I asked myself, what do I really want? And I think it's important to write down what you want, put it in writing. And so that's what I did. Now, sometimes, I think it is more powerful to like handwrite it, but there are other times where you can do it digitally. And so what I did 2 years ago is I had created this tracker. I asked myself what I wanted. I created these goals. And now I don't create goals the same way, and I'll get into that in a second, but at the time I set these goals. I was looking back at that tracker earlier this month, and it made me a little bit sad because the goals I was setting were very short term. I'm talking about 1 to 6 months. And I cannot remember where I was at, like mentally, my headspace at the time. I must have blocked out the rest. I must have blocked out the second half of that year because, like I said, it was very different from the first half. A lot of disruption. That environment that I worked in, I ended up losing that job in a traumatic way. And there's just a lot going on in the second half of that year. So I think I blocked out a lot of it. All that to say, I I wonder if because I was in survival mode at the time, if I could only focus on what I thought would get me out of survival mode. I also think that, maybe I thought if I just focus on that year, the second half of that year, that it would kind of set the foundation for future years. But I vaguely remember just not really being able to visualize or think or ask for what I wanted beyond just the second half of the year. And I just can't remember if that was intentional, like if I intentionally said just focus on the rest of this year, or if I just couldn't because of just where I was mentally. So I'm really grateful for where I am now because, like I said, 2 years ago, I was scared of the unknown and scared of, I don't want to take the wrong next step. And now there's still a lot of uncertainty in my life, but I'm more so like, I don't know what's next, but we're just gonna keep trying and moving along and seeing what happens. So that's definitely progress. Now, I don't set goals the same way anymore. I more so focus on who do I want to be and what do I need to do now to become before it comes. That sounds super complicated, but essentially it's focusing on identity. It's focusing on who do you want to be. So for example, I am someone, I'm going to say it in the present tense. I am someone who gets good quality, consistent sleep. So to become someone who gets good quality, consistent sleep before that's actually true, because it's not true yet, to become that version of me, things I can do now include, having a sleep routine or an evening routine and actually following it, or setting boundaries around my sleep, or making certain things around my sleep non-negotiable, things like that. Those are things that I can do now to take on the identity of someone who gets good quality sleep consistently before it actually happens. And as I do that regularly and, as I continue to do that, I will eventually become the person who I'm trying to be, which is somebody who gets good quality, consistent sleep. That is actually a real example of like an identity that I'm trying to shift into. Whereas in the past, I probably would have set a goal of like, I don't know, waking up by a certain time, 5 to 6 days a week, or something like that. That's probably how I would have set goals in the past. For me, setting goals that way wasn't really effective because I put pressure on myself, and then I also felt like I was kind of like performing in a way, and it no longer became about who I was becoming, and it more so just became about trying to check a box, so to speak. So now I don't set goals in that same way. I focus on who am I trying to become? What's the identity shift that I need to make to become that version of me? And then what habits do I need to create and build in order to become that version of me before it comes? What I do now, I still do have a tracker. It just looks different from that tracker that I talked about from 2 years ago. And I also don't have like a deadline or timeline for these shifts. It's just I start with the decision. I'm deciding this is who I am, and now I need to act like it. Which, if you've been following my series of my nutrition journey and why I don't call it weight loss, that's basically like something that I'm sharing is I've decided that I'm in the best shape of my life. So now I have to act like it. And I've been documenting and sharing my journey week to week of that identity shift in real time. So if you haven't checked that out already, go ahead and take a look at that series. So now what I do is I track the decisions that I'm making to shift my identity. And I do have a Airtable template that I use, and you can actually get a copy of that when you become a member of my Substack. You'll get a free copy of that template. So again, check out the link in the description for my Substack where you can become a member and receive a copy of that template. So I just want to end by saying this, that I can completely understand how if you thought that this year was going to be your year and we're 6 months in, and maybe you haven't felt like it's been your year. I can completely relate to that and understand that because this year, it's been more challenging than I thought it was going to be. But there's still 6 months left, and a lot can happen in 6 months. A lot can happen in 3 months. A lot can happen suddenly. So I just want to encourage you to, ask yourself what you want and believe that you're worthy of it and know that time is a construct. But still, we're still in this year, and there's still a lot of time for this year to be your year. How the year started can be completely different from how it ends, or how the year ends can look completely different from how it started. So this can still be your year. Keep going. Thanks for watching. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos, and I'll see you next time.